Hello, welcome back to the Movies for Breakfast podcast. I'm your host, Christy. On this podcast, I dissect movies in depth, I analyze them, I talk about history, culture, politics, media, whatever else I feel like. Today, we're going to be talking about Sinners, which I'm really excited about because I loved this movie, and upon rewatching it a couple times to make this episode, my appreciation for it has only grown from when I originally saw it in theaters, so we have a lot to dissect. So as always, I'm going to give a spoiler-free rating and review, and then like a little bit of a spoiler-free background on the movie, and then I'll get into a detailed plot synopsis and analysis of the film as we go through the story. If you are new, I don't know how you are consuming this content right now, but I post full video episodes on YouTube, and then I post clips with some visual aids for specific things I'm talking about on TikTok, as well as other random TikToks with my thoughts on art, culture, politics. And then I post full audio episodes pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast. Sinners came out in April 2025 this year. I saw it, maybe not opening weekend, but I saw it in April when it came out, and I had so much fun in the movie theater. I remember walking out thinking like, that is what I want to see when I go to the movies in person. That's the experience that I want to have with other people when we go to the movies together. If you don't know anything about Sinners, it is, I believe it's being like officially categorized as a horror. I don't like horror movies, and I don't feel like this really was. There were definitely like jump scares. I was definitely scared to watch it alone at night, and there was a bit of gore, but truly I feel like this was more like a historical drama with supernatural or paranormal elements added in. It was a really great movie. It was really great. I liked the writing, I liked the acting, I liked the cinematography, I liked the setting, I liked the music. I really liked pretty much everything about this movie, besides a little bit of the pacing and maybe some moments where it leans into the like horror genre tropes a bit too much for my liking, but it was also like sometimes really funny in those moments and really funny in general amidst some really dark stories. So I think I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5 stars. The first time I watched it, I gave it 4, but upon rewatching it, this happens a lot when I make an episode on a movie. I spend so much time with that movie and trying to understand it and looking up every single reference and looking up all the inspiration that I develop like more of an appreciation for the movie after I've written an episode for it. Yeah, that keeps happening. So I've updated my rating on second rewatch to be 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't seen it, I think you can rent it on Amazon Prime. I highly recommend watching it. I highly recommend watching it with people. And if you are easily spooked, maybe during the daytime. I just wouldn't watch it alone at night if you are someone who's scared of scary movies. It follows a pair of twins, both played by Michael B. Jordan, who has worked with Ryan Coogler, the director, many times before. If you don't know, Ryan Coogler also did Judas and the Black Messiah, Black Panther, and Creed, and other things too, but I think those are probably what he's most known for. So he's worked with Michael B. Jordan since I first heard of Michael B. Jordan, which was Black Panther. And seeing how much he's grown as an actor to this movie was very cool, because he played these two twins, and the way that he played two brothers differently enough, but similarly enough to understand their like bond as twins was very impressive to me. I really, really appreciated his performance, and I think that he did double the character work of playing a single person, and he did it really well. So we have these twins. They are nicknamed Smoke and Stack, and they are returning to their hometown, Clarksdale, Mississippi, which is a real town, and it's like an hour south of Memphis. They are returning to their hometown after having been in Chicago for some amount of time, and they are returning with lots of money to this poor southern town, and with the idea to open a juke joint, which is basically like a blues club for singing and dancing and drink. They also both have ex-lovers who they left behind for different reasons in Clarksdale, and we learn about those relationships. And their main familial connection that they're returning to in Clarksdale is their younger cousin Sammie, who is played by Miles Canton, who's only 20 years old in real life. And you can really feel, he definitely feels so young in the movie, like he's their baby cousin, their little cousin, but his performance was amazing. So their little cousin Sammie is a musician. He plays the guitar and he sings. And his father is the like preacher at their local congregation, their local church. And so everyone calls Sammie Preacher Boy because he helps with the sermons and stuff. But Sammie really wants to play his music. That's what he's passionate about. He doesn't want to follow in his father's footsteps. We see him getting pulled into the temptation of the juke joint with smoke and stack. I don't know if I said this takes place in 1932. That's obviously very important to the setting. This takes place in 1932. So we are still in the post-war, as in post-Civil War, Jim Crow era in the South, which means that like officially slavery ended, but in practice, it just changed and took new shapes, and segregation and racial discrimination and racial violence did not go anywhere during this time, especially like blatantly in the South. Although they definitely make it a point to acknowledge that it was in Chicago too. It was everywhere. So the juke joint is visited by vampires, and we see what happens from there. There's lots of historical and cultural references packed into this movie, and not in like a very obvious way. Just every decision that Ryan Coogler made, he made it with a sort of reference to weave in mind, or an element of history to weave in mind. And so, especially watching it a second time and like really taking the time to pause, take notes, look stuff up, I just found it so full of gold mines of pieces of American history that you can go down. And I really appreciate that. It's a joy to watch. I feel like everyone on set and everyone in this movie was clearly so passionate about it. And that really comes through. Another thing I'll say, spoiler free, like on the note of genre and vibe, is that I would call this like a Southern Gothic, which is a sort of subgenre of fiction in general, books, movies, TV, where especially in the American South in the antebellum period, which was before the Civil War, so during like full-blown slavery, and in the post-war Jim Crow era, there are a lot of stories of paranormal, dark things happening, as well as like specifically vampire stories set in the South. So when I saw the trailer for this movie, I was like, oh my God, Southern vampires, like obsessed. And it makes a lot of sense, right? It's like a perfect allegory for a lot of forms of racism and the like sort of extractive capitalism. Anne Rice is thought to have like really popularized this with Interview with a Vampire, which you might know as a movie with Tom Cruise. It's also a book. I have not read the book. I saw the movie and I remember liking it, but I don't remember anything about it, which is typical of me. The show True Blood, also in Louisiana. And we have a Confederate soldier as a vampire. The Vampire Diaries. I didn't watch it like consistently growing up, but I definitely have like tried to get in on the nostalgia train and rewatch it with people. It's set in Georgia. And one of the like main hot vampires, Damon, was a Confederate soldier in flashbacks. And I think they have flashbacks to the like evil doppelganger of Nina Dobrev's character on a plantation also. So definitely they engage with like antebellum romanticization and vampires. I remember reading a book series called Beautiful Creatures when I was in like elementary school or middle school. And that was also set in the deep South and had to do with vampires. And it was so set in the South. Like I feel like I learned a lot about the South reading that, even though it was not like an intellectual or literary series by any means. In Twilight, even though they're in Washington, they're in the Pacific Northwest, one of the vampires in the Cullen family, Jasper, was a Confederate fucking soldier. That's about all I'm going to say spoiler free. Go watch the movie for sure and then come back. You can still listen to this episode if you haven't seen the movie and like follow along with what's going on. I just don't want anyone to like miss out on seeing this movie and think that my analysis is a replacement for watching the movie, because it's definitely not in this case. There is so much to see and hear yourself. But if you watched it a long time ago, or if you have no memory of anything after you watch a movie, which is me, I don't remember the plot of anything, then fear not, we'll go through it together. That was your spoiler warning. Spoilers are beginning now. We open on a sort of voiceover with these very beautiful like etching drawings basically. And the voiceover is saying there are like singers from all these different cultures with the power to pierce the veil between life and death and summon old and future spirits. So they show like Irish folklore, Native American, African, some other things. Like just every culture essentially, we're assuming, has some type of music that some of the musicians have this like supernatural power. Our story starts in Clarksdale, Mississippi, October 16, 1932. So like I said, Clarksdale is a real town. It's about an hour south of Memphis, Tennessee, and it is known for being like one of the biggest hubs for the beginnings of blues music. A very beat up, ragged looking Sammie is sort of stumbling into church while his father's giving a sermon. His father is like the local pastor, and he's like all bloodied. He has scratches across his cheeks. His guitar is totally broken in his hand, and he looks traumatized. And we see like kind of flickers, like jump scare flickers of very scary vampire shit. Everyone inside the church is wearing white. They're singing in a choir. It's like the perfect image of a safe haven or a very like morally pure in the Christian sense environment. And so the preacher is encouraging Sammie to drop the guitar and along with it his sinning ways. So clearly like he doesn't approve of Sammie being a musician or performing, and we don't totally know why. Cut to one day earlier. The sun is just rising, it looks like, and we see some people in a field humming while picking cotton. There's this like very cute small town community vibe, but it looks like a pretty poor rural community. And Sammie is like saying hello to his mom and his little siblings, waking up his siblings. And he has this moment where he kind of looks out into the distance longingly, maybe at like a faraway town. So that's Sammie. Cut to Smoke and Stack. We meet Smoke and Stack, our Michael B. Jordan twins. They're kind of leaning against their car outside this building. So they're waiting on this guy who pulls up, and it's this like older white guy who just doesn't have the best vibes. When they ask him his name, he literally just like spits. Disgusting behavior. He just keeps disrespecting them in these like macro aggressive ways, honestly. But they're buying this old sawmill from him. That's the building they're standing in front of. They're buying this old sawmill from him just in with a duffel bag full of cash. And he seems to be really kind of like suspicious of them, like wants to know what they plan on doing with the place or whatever, but they're giving him back the energy that he's giving them, which is to not really answer his questions. So they've bought the mill, the equipment, the land it's on, and they said, if you or anyone from the clan comes by here, we will shoot you dead. This is it. We bought it from you. You have to be gone. And this guy just looks at them and he's like, the clan doesn't exist anymore. And they just take a drag of their cigarettes in response, looking at him like, okay, dude. Back with Sammie in like the village, he walks into church to say hi to his dad, and he's saying good morning and that he finished his quota for the day. So he must have woken up like super early and finished his quota for picking cotton for the day. So if you don't know, in this era, as opposed to the traditional form of slave labor that they were using before on these cotton plantations, they had other ways of getting cheap or free labor, and one of them was this system called sharecropping. So Sammie and his family seem to be sharecroppers. So they rent their plot of land that they live on, and maybe also the church or I don't know what, from whoever owns the plantation, who would have been like the same family probably as the slave owning plantation owner. In exchange, like as rent, they work the land. So Sammie has woken up early and done all of the work he needs to do for that day. And his guitar is sitting in the corner of the church. He's kind of looking at it like he wants his guitar back, and his dad says, oh yeah, I brought it. I want you to help give my sermon tomorrow. So maybe it's Saturday night and tomorrow will be Sunday for church. And he has Sammie read a passage from the Bible to practice for the sermon. And it's all about temptation and greed. Obviously, the theme of the movie, the title of the movie, Sinners, it has a lot to do with the themes of temptation and sin and what it even means to sin. Sammie kind of reads through the passage quickly and he like knows it by heart. He closes the Bible as he's reading and he's like, okay, but can I take my guitar and go though? You know? And his father says, son, you keep dancing with the devil, one day it's gonna follow you home. Ominous. Obviously, this is good foreshadowing for everything that's going to go down, but it also represents like one of the central themes of the movie, which is where is the actual line for sin? Like, what is sinning morally, truly evil or wrong versus like sinning because it's against the rules, but actually it's just a demonization of human behavior. Because traditional Christian values, Christian teachings demonize a lot of like normal, natural human behaviors as sin, like sex outside of marriage. And we're going to dig more into this question of like what truly is sin. But the twins pick up Sammie, and that's their little cousin. They call him little cousin. They say, "Don't worry, Uncle Judd. We'll get him back to you in one piece," which we know is true from the opening, but at what cost? They're driving down the road with Sammie, and one of the first things they ask him about is they make sure that he's good at home, that he's not basically being hit by his father. We will quickly find out that it's because they were abused by their father very badly. So they check on their baby cousin, basically make sure he's okay. And Sammie establishes for us that they've just come down from Chicago. By the way, I didn't mention this in the scene when they buy the old sawmill, but they're in these like beautiful suits. Smoke always wears something blue and Stack always wears something red, which is like a very important device for us as the viewer to distinguish between them, but also like matches their personalities in a way where like Smoke represents the more level-headed, logical, safe person, and Stack represents the more hot-headed, go with the flow, risk-taking personality. They've just come back from Chicago. He asks, "Is it true there's no Jim Crow in Chicago? Black men can really be free?" And they're like, "No, Chicago, it's the same thing, just with tall buildings." And I think that was an important point that Ryan Coogler probably wanted to include, that when we talk about the South and when we talk about Jim Crow, let's not like accidentally extrapolate that to say that everything was different up north and that racial segregation and violence was only in the South, because that's absolutely not true. They stop somewhere on like a dirt road and they uncover some foliage to reveal a cargo truck that they had clearly stowed there before, and a snake got in. The snake like hisses out. It's a little jump scare and also very biblical, the idea of a snake as a symbol of evil, as a symbol of the devil, temptation. So the snake is hissing and Smoke stabs it. And Sammie's kind of like taken aback by this, but the twins are like unfazed. Maybe partially because of this moment with the snake giving him pause, Smoke is just like clearly feeling kind of nervous about their project, and he's saying, "Look, we're running late, we're running behind. Let's just set up this weekend and we'll open next weekend." But Stack is like, "No, it's the big opening. We have to make a big moment out of it. We can do this." So Smoke's like, "Okay, we're going to have to split up. So Sammie, you go with Stack. Make sure he doesn't get into trouble because he doesn't know how to take care of himself, because Stack is the more reckless one. Smoke says he's going to take the truck and do his errand separately." Okay? So they have like kind of a to-do list of people to pick up and things to plan for the night, and they're splitting up to get it done. So Smoke takes the truck, he parks in town, like what looks like downtown or like the main street or whatever. There's some jazzy, bluesy music playing, like things are getting underway. We're kind of on a montagey mission. And we're seeing the vibes in town. People are hanging out, people are smoking, people are chatting. We get a little handheld camera moment on people hanging around just to show that this is like a very natural, casual, lively environment, right? So Smoke has parked the truck and he like doesn't want to leave it. So he has this little girl come over, it's probably like 13 or something, and she's terrified because she knows who the Smokestack twins are, right? They're like famous in this town, but he just wants to pay her to watch the truck for him while he goes inside the store. And he offers like 5 cents a minute or something, and she accepts, and he goes, "No, you have to negotiate." And he gives her like a little business lesson on negotiation, which I thought was sweet. Like he's clearly a caregiver type. He's the older brother type, even though they're twins, and he wants to take care of people. He goes into Chow Market and says hi to this man, Bo Chow, who owns the market, with his wife, who we'll meet in a second. These two characters, the Chow family, were included also to highlight like a part of history that not a lot of people might know about, which is that there were lots of Chinese migrants in the South in this time period. And they kind of played an interesting role because at the time, racial segregation and Jim Crow was so quite literally black and white. Where do you put Chinese immigrants on that? And so oftentimes they were able to straddle the line a little bit more. So they have a market on one side of the street that serves black customers and a market on the other side of the street that serves white customers. I was confused by this at first. I like didn't understand why there were two buildings. That's why, segregation. And I think part of the reason they're able to work both clienteles is because they don't fit in this like binary racial framework. The camera keeps overheating and dying, and I think it's because I'm recording in 4K, which I'm doing because then it crops in better quality for verticals. But if it keeps happening, even though I've made some fixes, then I might just have to switch. Anyway, Smoke embraces Bo and like says hello as if they're, you know, very good old friends, almost like family. But just as they're kind of catching up, like, why are you back from Chicago? The girl is honking the horn for the truck outside to say that like people are trying to steal from the truck. And he just sees like the backs of two people like digging through the back of the trunk, and he just, no hesitation, shoots one of them like right in the ass. And then the guy turns around and it's his old friend Terry. Like, they know each other. And then the other guy, like, obviously they've both been caught, but then Smoke, like, just after a pause, after hesitating, shoots the other guy in the knee, which was gross. But he's basically like, I can't have people thinking that they can steal from us and get away with it. So very much, you know, gang mentality, gang violence. I think one of the friends mentions that they were in Chicago working for Al Capone. So they've been involved with like organized crime in Chicago, and clearly have brought some of those lessons home. But he leaves money with Bo to take care of the guys who got shot so they don't like die of infection. He uses the violence insofar as it's necessary when you have an economic situation where you don't have any kind of like legal reinforcement. Like, you're not going to call the cops on these guys because they might be killed or effectively re-enslaved. So the form of justice that you have, the form of deterrence for robbery, is violence. And that's why gangs are violent, because they can't call the cops. Normally it's because they can't call the cops because the activity is illegal. Like, they're not going to have asset protection for their coke. But in this situation, it also applies because the cops are mostly white supremacists. So it's not safe for any of them to call the cops. And they also don't want anyone who like petty thieves them to face like extremely disproportionate consequences because of that. Anyway, Bo sends their daughter Lisa to go get her mom, and she walks across the street and we kind of follow her with like a POV. She's young, but she's proud, she's confident. Lisa like sends her mom over and takes over the register. Mom goes back to the other store on the other side. She's like, Smoke, why are you causing trouble? Why are you shooting people outside of our store? And Smoke's like, I didn't start it, you know, but I do need something from you. Can you make signs for us? So she makes like business signs basically, and they have a little business exchange, negotiate on price. She's super sharp. Again, they're like old friends. So she's going to make a sign for the juke joint. That's one errand done. And then he also orders like a ton of food from them for the night. The chows are in, we have the food for the night, and we have the sign. Back with our other team, Stack and Sammie are just driving down the road still. And this is one thing I will say about Ryan Coogler. Like, this whole movie, wherever it is sexually explicit, it's always centering on female pleasure and coming from a very like female point of view, almost. Like, he doesn't feel like he's applying a male gaze to sex in this movie, and I really appreciated it. But anyway, it starts here. Even though there's only men in this scene, Stack is like basically teaching his younger cousin like, okay, this is what you do to make a woman feel good. Sammie changes the subject. He's like, you said you would tell me what happened to your dad once I was older. So what happened? Like, did you guys really kill him? So they have a reputation around town, and the reason why people are scared of them is because the reputation is that they killed their father and then went and worked for Al Capone, basically. And Stack reveals that Smoke killed their father. He says, Daddy knocked me unconscious, and when I came to, Smoke was burying him. So in every situation, we'll see this kind of dynamic repeat where Smoke is the protector. Smoke is the person who takes care of and protects other people. So Stack was like really beaten badly by their dad this one time, and Smoke just killed him. I think it's also an interesting duality because like on the surface, you would think that Stack would be the more violent one just because he's a bit more like rambunctious, but Smoke has this like quiet fury under the surface where he's very rational and very calm, but if he needs to use violence to protect people he loves, he will. And that's why he like very calmly shot the people outside the truck, and that's why he killed their father. They actually gifted Sammie the guitar he has. Now the guitar looked interesting to me because I had never seen a guitar like that where it has like a metal circle on it on the front, where normally on an acoustic guitar you would just have like a hole in the wood. Instead it's like a metal plate with perforations in it. So I looked it up. This specific guitar they used was a 1932 Dobro Cyclops. It's the type of guitar is a resonator guitar. So it was kind of in this in-between before the electric guitar was invented or used widespread. people needed a way to play the guitar in performances or in like juke joints like this and have it be heard by a large crowd of people, because the acoustic guitar doesn't project much. So they would basically use these like metal plates to help the sound resonate and project a lot louder. Pretty cool. If you're like a music person, you probably had already heard of that, but I had never heard of that. So I thought that was cool. And it also has like an interesting sound to it. Like it makes the guitar sound not electric, but have more depth to it than an acoustic guitar. Like it's not as twangy. It's a little bit more bluesy than a regular acoustic guitar. So it has a really cool sound to it. And the composer, Ludwig Göransson, sorry, I've probably said that very wrongly, Ludwig Göransson, said that this guitar was like so important to the score and to the heart of the film. Also, Sammie, who's this like young guy, he has a deep voice. Like he has such a beautiful, deep, soulful voice that when he strums a guitar and starts singing, like right there in the car in the passenger seat, Stack does a double take at him and his eyes light up and he's like, we are going to make money on this. You can see that Sammie is like a different person almost when he performs. He goes from being this sort of shy or like, you know, dutiful kid to a confident and embodied version of himself. They get to the train station and they're walking down the platform looking for a musician that Stack knows who he also wants to get to play at the club. This man is Delta Slim, and he's like playing the harmonica on the platform, busking, basically, for money. Stack introduces Sammie as the finest blues player in all the Delta, the Mississippi Delta. Delta Slim is drunk, he's laughing, and he's not interested in coming to play at the juke joint, basically. He has his gig that he does, like he has a more consistent gig that he plays every weekend. Does not pay him well at all, but at least he knows it's always there. And he says, basically, he makes enough money to buy all the booze he needs to stay drunk, and a sinner like me can't ask for more than that. So he, for whatever reason, feels that he doesn't deserve more than this like pretty sad life of lonely alcoholism and poverty. Pretty sad. Stack is not satisfied. He really wants Delta Slim to come play at the juke joint. He knows it'll be a huge like pull factor for customers. And also if you feel that there's like a personal connection there where he wants, the same way that Smoke like encouraged the little girl to negotiate for herself, you feel like Stack genuinely wants Delta Slim to want more for himself and to be more ambitious and not like accept a life of poverty. Stack cracks open like a cold beer and you hear that like crispy like and Stack says he has 500 more bottles of that Irish beer from Chicago. So I'll give you all the bottles you can drink and I'll pay you $40 tonight, which $40 in today's money would be like, I don't know, way more. Whatever it is, it's way more than what Delta Slim is getting paid at his normal gig. Presumably he accepts, because then we like cut to a few moments later. Slim and Sammie are playing together on the platform and they've gathered like a crowd of people listening and cheering and enjoying the music. And meanwhile, Stack is like, come see them tonight, come to the grand opening. So very successful, but they're drawing a lot of attention. And so in the background, this woman seems to hear Stack's voice, and just by the sound of his voice, she turns around. She's recognized him. This is our Haley Steinfeld. She's playing Mary. So Mary hears Stack and she's like intrigued, surprised, kind of pissed off, and she starts strutting over, and Sammie's like tapping Stack on the shoulder being like, hey dude, like this white lady's looking at you, you know, be careful, which is not a throwaway line. Like I said, like nothing is accidental in this movie. The reason why Sammie would be on guard at a white woman approaching Stack like that in public is because of the weaponization of white femininity against black men, like throughout American history, during slavery as well, but especially during this era when lynchings were so common and the KKK was really brazenly still able to carry them out without any consequences whatsoever. Oftentimes the justification, doing air quotes for my audio listeners, the justification for that would be that the man that they lynched supposedly sexually assaulted or raped a white woman, right? And like normally, I'm always saying, obviously believe victims of rape and assault, like women very rarely lie about that. But in these situations, it's used as like a justification for murder by white people against a black man because it's often just made up. He either didn't even know the woman or he just glanced at her a certain way. Like in the context of this racial binary, in the framework of the white supremacist, white women are the most vulnerable, like delicate flowers to be protected, and black men are the aggressors, which is of course insanely ironic and fucked up when they're saying that as they're murdering black men. That's why Sammie's like, why is this white woman strutting towards you? So she approaches them and she says, is this Smoke or Stack? And Stack is like terrified of her in a very comical way at this point. He's like, don't look at her, like, go away. He waves Sammie away. And this clip of their confrontation like has been clipped so many times. It was in so many promotional materials. This was like the one clip that I knew by heart before even going to the movie. And this is when she's like confronting him about leaving her, essentially. She says, I waited for you. I thought you loved me. Like, why did you abandon me, basically? And he clearly is like being kind of cruel and harsh to her, trying to get her to go away. But you can tell that it's not because he doesn't care about her. It's because he's trying to protect both of them from the danger of them being seen together or being together at all. Like, he's like trying to get her to be quieter and more careful. And she, having been living as a white woman for a long time at this point, has lost maybe her sense of like constant vigilance and fear that Stack has in public spaces with white people. He's wondering why she's back in Clarksdale. Apparently she has left Clarksdale as well. And she says she buried her mom yesterday. And neither him nor Smoke were there. They didn't send flowers. They didn't send anything. And she's pissed because her mom basically helped raise them. They were like family growing up. Mary's mother was 1/4 black. So she had one black grandparent, and that makes Mary 1/8 black because her father was white. But it sounds like she doesn't really know her father. She was raised by her mother in the black community in Clarksdale. So she was like family to Smoke and Stack. And her mother took care of them like her own babies. This can be really confusing, especially if you're not American or not familiar with American racial dynamics. But at the time, there was this very arbitrary system of defining people's races, right? Because race is a social construct. It is not an exact science in any way. And white supremacy, as much as it tries to uphold a separation and a lack of mixing of racial identities, you cannot prevent that from happening. Racial identity is always changing, is always mixing. So what did they do with mixed people, with mixed heritage? What did they do with people who were only partially black and partially white? They had this idea called the one drop rule, which is that if you are in any part of your heritage black, then you're considered black in terms of how you were going to be treated under Jim Crow and segregation. But with Mary, played by Haley Steinfeld, she looks white. Like, you would not look at her and think that she was mixed race. So she has clearly chosen, or has been chosen for her in her adult life, to pass as white. I had to scrap the 4K because the camera kept overheating. So if the quality is noticeably worse, that's why, but I just don't think it's worth it. But I was saying, she has chosen in her adult life to live as a white woman, to pass as a white woman. But that comes with costs. She has left behind her community that she knew growing up, and she has had to hide part of her identity and part of herself. I feel like her costume design is really important in this identity because she's wearing, like what I'm wearing, very pale pink, like cutesy little hat, a very feminine pink dress, pink gloves, and it's all part of the performance of whiteness. It's all part of the performance of being this like perfectly feminine white woman, even though we immediately see her personality is not that. She's like very confrontational, confident, strong, talks however she feels like talking. She does not talk like a lady, but she is performing basically all the time. But yeah, so as a child, she was raised in Clarksdale in the black community. And because Smoke and Stack's father, the twins' father, was so horrible and abusive, her mother cared for them. And I think their mom died maybe during childbirth, but whatever the situation was, like Mary's mom was like a mom to the twins as well, which is in large part why she's so mad that they didn't do anything for the funeral or come to the funeral. Seems like he didn't know about it, but the point is that like he didn't know because he abandoned her and is no longer in her life, and that's what she's so hurt by. And you can tell that like even though he is pretty shaken up to see her, he's very anxious about being together in public in this way, and he also is trying to just like get her to leave him alone. So he's being quite mean to her, and even after he hears that her mom just passed away, he says like pretty horrible things about her mom too, like, oh yeah, we didn't really care about her, she was just like food in a warm bed, which is obviously fucked up. And I feel like this really shows part of the generational trauma of slavery and Jim Crow, which is just that all of these people's lives and family and their most core childhood experiences and who they consider their family has been fucked up basically by segregation and by white supremacy. So it's just really sad. But Mary is not having it. One thing about Mary is she doesn't let anyone disrespect her. So she says, "Rotten hell stack," and then struts away. This was a great scene. Both of their acting was so good. I really instantly liked Mary, but I also totally understood Stack, why he was being mean to her. And I also understood why he was so anxious at her approaching him in public like that and speaking loudly about their relationship. So now we're gathering our crew. So in the car, we've got Stack, Sammie, and Slim driving down the dirt road. The sun is high in the sky. Ryan Coogler keeps giving us these shots of where the sun is in the sky so we can kind of understand, like, this is all taking place in the span of 24 hours. We started with the sunrise when Sammie's done working in the field, and then now we're at like noon, and the twins have been running around doing all these errands all day preparing to open up the juke joint. So on this road, as they're driving, they pass what's basically called a chain gang, which is like these imprisoned men in their prison uniforms working. They're like digging maybe for a railroad, I don't know, but doing this clearly like back-breaking manual labor. And there's two white men. All of the men working are black, and there's two white men like sitting on horses basically supervising them. But the image, the visual, it doesn't really look different from slavery. It is a very powerful and sad image of how slavery evolved and how people figured out how to continue to use slave labor, even when technically owning slaves became illegal. So as they drive by, they hear the men are all singing. As they swing their pickaxes, they're like singing a song, and Slim calls out to them, like says hello to them and waves his hat. And one of them stands up to say hello, and we just hear a gunshot. Like, the wardens or whoever are so oppressive and so strict, they won't even allow a second pause to say hello to a car passing by. Slim knew all of those men, and he looks so just like traumatized and sad as he explains that basically they've all been busted for vagrancy by white police, which is like not a real crime, right? It's like a pretty much made up way to arrest black people for nothing. Slim says that initially when they got in trouble with the police, they actually didn't go to jail or get killed because the police heard how good their music was. And so they took them on the road to play music instead to make them money. They were doing ragtime songs and blues. Slim says, "White folks like the blues just fine, but not the people who make it." And that's exactly why vampires are such a good allegory for racism and white supremacy in a way, because the same way that a vampire like is attracted to life and sucks the life out of people, steals their lifeblood, white people are drawn to and attracted to black culture and art and music. So they made a lot of money on the road. And then one of his friends was going to go move somewhere else, and he took all of his money with him, like cash on him physically, when he got on the train. And he got caught by the Klan, the KKK. And they made up a story that he killed some white man and raped some white man's wife, and they lynched him right there in the railroad station. So just the way that like it's inevitable that someone of Delta Slim's age and demographic would have friends who had been brutally murdered in public in this way is just devastating. And that's, I mentioned this earlier about how like white femininity is weaponized against black men, and how he definitely did not kill some white man and rape his wife. That was a story that the Klan could make up and nobody was going to question it or fact check it. Yeah, and he was murdered just for having too much money on him. And you can see how Slim, witnessing that as a young person, would lose his ambition to become a successful musician and become rich, because no matter what you do, you can just get killed one day, you know, and he's viscerally aware of that. He looks really horribly sad as he tells this story, and he's almost starting to cry, but then he turns the crying into humming instead, humming a song and kind of tapping out a rhythm. And this was a beautiful moment for me. This was such a powerful moment in the movie, showing the transformation from the generational trauma and the overwhelming grief into music. Quite literally, he turns his crying into music. And you can see how that melancholy in the blues music is coming from pain and suffering. And this is true about the history of blues. Blues really arose and was inspired by the pain and suffering and the generational trauma of Jim Crow and of the Reconstruction era. And Slim is like a perfect embodiment of that. After this, those three in the car end up stopping at another cotton field that's presumably also being worked by sharecroppers, and they pick up their friend Cornbread, who presumably has earned that nickname because he's kind of a big guy. They need him to work at the juke joint, and at first he's like saying that he can't go and that he has to finish his work, but then Stack says something like he's gonna make so much money that his wife is gonna be real happy with him, and he gets mad, like, don't talk about my wife like that. But his wife is right there and she's like, how much money? And she's pregnant. Obviously they need the money. She's like, go for it. I love this. I don't know. I love like a little montage of gathering the troops for something. That crew is getting all together. Let's check in with Smoke, on the other hand. He looks really nervous getting out of the car somewhere, and he's holding this little kind of sad bunch of flowers that he had taken from the chow market. And he approaches this, like, there's a small kind of shack house, and off to the side is a patch of grass with a child's grave, like a tiny little cross, and I don't know if there were like child's shoes or something, like you can tell. And he put down the flowers there and kind of knelt and like said a prayer or something. So devastating. You figure out pretty quickly, like, he lost a child. He goes inside and sees Annie. So Annie is introduced to us as kind of a spiritual leader in the community, and this is one of the things that I like was the most unfamiliar with and had to check up on and research. But firstly, Annie is played by Wunmi Mosaku. She is Nigerian British. In the movie, she is also meant to be of Nigerian ancestry, I think, because at one point she says something and the subtitle said it was in Yoruba, which is like her Nigerian ethnicity. Anyway, she's beautiful. I was getting nervous, honestly, through the promotion of the movie, how much Hailee Steinfeld was so central in everything. I was kind of like, why, even in this movie that is like celebrating Black history and Black art and culture, why is Hailee Steinfeld like our face of it? But actually, Annie is like arguably even more of a main character in the movie. And it was really nice to see because she is a dark-skinned Black woman, kind of a bigger woman, which I know like is like kind of an insane thing to say, but in Hollywood, the standard is insane, you know? And as soon as he walks in, you can kind of tell there's a vibe between them. Like, I instantly knew that they were in love. And that's also a testament to the amazing acting. Like, they had so much tension immediately. But the contrast between this confrontation and the confrontation between Mary and Stack is interesting because Mary comes up to Stack like full steam, pissed off, basically. Whereas Smoke and Annie have this intense, kind of maybe more deeply painful and less angry reunion. Annie she's not saying much. Her sort of power in an argument basically is to not fill the silence. She's going to let him explain himself. But also, I would just want to explain what her like little shop is. This is like, I think, her home and like a little shop because people had stopped by. She is practicing something called hoodoo or root work or conjuring. Those are like all different names for it. It's not the same thing as voodoo or vodou, which are more of an established religion, whereas hoodoo is kind of a mishmash and a combination of West African traditions brought over in the slave trade and passed down through generations, and also Christian traditions in the American South. So it kind of interweaves a lot of different traditions and beliefs, and it's not necessarily a religion as much as it is like a particular spiritual tradition and practice. She has like a lot of knowledge that's been passed down generationally from other women. She says she learned from her grandmother that she uses to sell people like charms for protection, things like that. So Smoke seems to be nervous and he doesn't know how to approach trying to connect with her. So he takes the approach of saying that he wants to hire her for the juke joint to cook that night, or that he wants to give her money. She's not interested in the money. She says his money is cursed and she doesn't want anything to do with it. It's blood money, because she knows that they were involved with Al Capone in Chicago before coming back down. And she also makes a kind of like passive aggressive comment of like, I thought you were a northern man now, because he clearly abandoned her just as Stack abandoned Mary, except they had lost a child together, so they were probably more serious in a relationship. They represent two different ideologies about power. So she is, in his view, superstitious, and he kind of dismisses her beliefs as nonsense and that the only real power in life is money. And you can understand why he would have that point of view, because the only thing that has given him agency so far in his life is money. From her point of view, she's been handed down this tradition generations and generations ago that you can engage with the earth and you can engage with spirituality as a form of protection. And she has a kind of like core moral and a core ethic of not dealing with dirty money. And also him being so dismissive, she's kind of rolls her eyes at that because she has been praying for him and working every route her grandma taught her to keep him and his brother safe this whole time. His voice breaks when he asks why it didn't work on their baby. And he just seemed so like truly heartbroken. And this kind of gets through to her and she says she doesn't know, but you can see that there's this big emotional chasm between them because they both share this like impossible grief, but they've dealt with it so opposite. But yeah, Michael B. Jordan, just his acting has progressed so much. He really, like, I was choked up at so many of his line deliveries, and this one really got me. And her acting is amazing too, but this is the first thing I've seen her in. So whereas with him, like, I remember not thinking he was such a great actor. She asks him if he still has that mojo bag. So she had given him a mojo bag, which is like a small pouch of certain herbs that she had prepared for him as a protection talisman, essentially. And he unbuttons his shirt and he shows that he's still wearing it. And he gives it to her and she's like working on replenishing it. And the music now is kind of soft, instrumental, romantic, sad. The tension is kind of broken and it's just sad. And so you hear her kind of reciting lines over the herbs and stuff she's preparing for the mojo bag. It's spiritual, magical, all of that. And she asks him, like, what are you really here for? What do you want? And he tries to, get around it. I just want you to cook. And she calls him by his government name, Elijah, not Smoke. And he says, okay, it hurts being back here, but I love you and I miss you. And that is really what she needed to hear from him. And she's quite forgiving of the fact that he left her. I think she understands how he was not equipped maybe emotionally to deal with that loss and why he ran away from it. Once they're not beefing anymore, the energy turns freaky pretty quickly. And again, this is you feel more so that if anything, she's objectifying him, but no one's objectifying anyone. It's romantic and intimate, but she is a sexy, powerful, and confident woman. And her expressing her sexuality and her desire for, I feel like he's her husband, but I don't know. It felt so much more true to human relationships and intimacy and love than what we often see on screen, which objectifies women. He loves this woman and she knows that. And she kind of indulges in the sexual power that she has over him. And it's a very romantic moment. So we've got lovers reunited. We've got a crew gathered together. We've got Mr. and Mrs. Chow loading up the car with all the food and supplies and waving bye to their daughter who's gonna stay at the store. And the music is going from this sad or emotional instrumental into a bit more of a rhythmic vibe. It has a little bit more soul to it, and we can tell we're building up to the night. The night is coming. Okay? Cut. There's a big cut here. I think this is the moment. It's hard because I only saw this aspect ratio change when I saw it in theaters. I didn't see it when I rewatched it on streaming. It doesn't show up on streaming. And so I don't remember exactly when it is, but I think this is one of the moments where we move from a super wide aspect ratio to a taller aspect ratio that fills an IMAX screen. And it's a cut to a big field. The sun seems to be setting and there's a isolated farmhouse in the middle of a field. And this man jump scare music cuts, lurches in front of the camera and is kind of limbering towards the house. He's burning alive. Very scary. This was one of the spookier jump scares just because the mood shift is really intense. But I want to explain the aspect ratio stuff. There's a really great video of Ryan Coogler explaining shooting on film and all the different aspect ratios and how they made this movie in such a unique way. I'll link that video in my episode description. Sinners is the first film ever to be shot at both the super wide 2.76 to 1 aspect ratio. If you saw The Hateful Eight and you remember it being super, super wide, that's what that aspect ratio is, and that's what we've been seeing so far. But also it was shot in IMAX, which is 1.43 to 1 and is much more of a squarish ratio, not so wide. Okay? This is the first movie to ever be shot in both of those aspect aspect ratios. I thought that was so cool. And not just from like an artistic point of view, but from a technical point of view. And you can tell by the way that Ryan Coogler is talking about it. He's such like a film nerd. But from a technical point of view, it's really impressive and really like complicated how they did it, because it was also all shot on film. It was shot entirely on 65 to 70 millimeter film, which is like the biggest, widest film reels. But yeah, in certain moments, we actually change aspect ratio. We grow, like when it goes from wide to taller, you feel like the scene grows and you feel a little bit more immersed in it, versus when it's wider, you feel more like a voyeur outside of it. And I think that's so cool and so innovative. But anyway, that's just to give you context about what's happening visually in this scene and how this cut is so dramatic. Like you really feel that this is now, okay, we're breaking into act 2 here. So this man has like, his clothes are all ripped up and he's bloodied and he's burning and he's running towards this house in the field. He bangs on the door really frantically and he's wearing like a dirty white tank top, like a wife beater tank top. He looks like a sus guy. He looks like a guy you wouldn't let into your home. But this couple opens the door, they swing the door open and they both have like big rifles pointed at him. They're a white couple and he's like begging for help, but they're obviously suspicious. And at first he's kind of just objectively explaining what's going on. He says, and he's speaking in a southern accent, but he says, I thought I could trust them, but they tried to kill me, the Choctaw. So the Choctaw Nation are Native Americans that are in this area. And what's really interesting about this is that this guy who's knocking on their door, speaking in a southern accent, but actually he is Irish. He's an Irish vampire. And the Irish and the Choctaw have a legit super long history together. I had no idea about this, but this was such a cool thing to include. This is what I mean when I say that like every little detail has some tie and some thread to a really interesting part of history. From the Choctaw Nation's official website, they say, nothing divides the Choctaw people from the Irish except for the ocean. Basically what happened is that during the period of the Trail of Tears, which again, if you're not American and you don't know what that was, it kind of encompasses a large series of expulsions, forced expulsions and ethnic cleansing of Native Americans off of their land, where they were increasingly forced out west so that the white settlers could take over more and more land. Then it was called the Trail of Tears because it was an incredibly arduous, dangerous journey that many of them died on. But as the Choctaw were forced onto this migration path, they met an Irish soldier who told them about the oppression and famine happening in Ireland. And so they had similar experiences of oppression and starvation by a colonial power. And so the Choctaw people actually came together and sent donations. They sent money to Ireland to help them in their cause and during their famine. Pretty cool. I'll leave a link also to the Choctaw Nation website that explains Choctaw and Irish history. So that was in like the 1840s. And then in 1995, the Irish president visited the Choctaw Nation in like a diplomatic visit or something to thank them for their historical aid and reestablish the relationship. In 2017, they erected a sculpture in Middleton, the town in Ireland where the Choctaw had sent aid to. The Irish made a sculpture commemorating their gift. There's yearly scholarships for Choctaw students to study in Ireland. Just a very cool thing. Wherever there's colonialism going on, you might find Irish people in solidarity. And Ryan Coogler said that he chose Remmick being Irish because he's obsessed with Irish folk music. He loves Irish history and culture, and he thinks that there's a lot of like interesting crossover between African American culture and Irish culture. Again, the experience of being oppressed as a people and having your native language, religion, culture, everything be degraded and beat down by an oppressor. Coogler also said that he wanted this vampire figure to be confused by the racial dynamics, basically. Like he is coming in as an outsider, as a sort of like alien to the American South during Jim Crow. And he's kind of like, what's going on here? You know, because it is weird. It is a constructed reality. Anyway, at this point, all we know is that he has banged on this door and asked them to take him in because the Choctaw are chasing him down. The husband or the man in the couple immediately says like something heinously racist. I think he says the N-word like pretty immediately. And Remmick, the vampire, is now desperately begging. Like, we can see his flesh is like literally burning off. And he spots very conspicuously behind the couple, there's like a KKK robe sitting right there on the bench. So he sees that, and now he starts pleading and crying. He's saying that they took his wife, and he starts using slurs to describe the Choctaw as well. So he knows how to navigate the white supremacy dynamic. Like, he has learned or like understood that like this is the language they speak. He is weaponizing his whiteness in this situation to gain sympathy from racist white people by aligning with them against the natives. And again, with saying that they took his wife, playing into the weaponization of white femininity, like we've been talking about. So that works, because even though this man is bloody and his flesh is burning off and he's wearing nothing but a white tank top, he's racist too, so we're all besties. Cut to a little bit later, the sun is setting. On top of the house, there's some birds of prey circling very ominously. And the Choctaw in question pull up in a buggy and on a couple of horses. They have beautiful horses, beautiful clothes, and if I looked up every shot of this movie to understand the historical accuracy, I would never have time to do this. But I think Ryan Coogler has gained my trust that he hired so many consultants to try to be as historically accurate and respectful of different cultural traditions, that I trust that he collaborated with the Choctaw Nation on this depiction to be historically accurate. So their clothes are beautiful, their horses are beautiful, and they approach and knock on the door. The woman opens the door for them, again pointing her gun at them. "Evening, ma'am. We're in pursuit of someone very dangerous." Like a scary warning that I would listen to if someone knocked on my door. "Have you seen this man?" They're basically like, "Have you seen this man?" And she's like, "No." And they go, "Okay, like, are you sure? Because he's not what he looks like. He's very dangerous. If you let him into your home, you're in trouble. Like, we have to act now." And she's still just like pointing the gun at them and doesn't trust them. In Choctaw, we get subtitles. One of the other guys says, "We have to go before it's too late." And his eye is on the sunset. The sun is setting. He's getting nervous. He's like, we have to go. Like, we can't help them. And so they say, "May God be with you. Hope God keeps you safe. Bye." And they leave. They tried to help. I also really like this dynamic showing how oftentimes like indigenous wisdom and indigenous knowledge of native dangers and how to safely live somewhere, when white settlers or whenever like colonial settlers expel native populations and don't respect their wisdom and their like generational knowledge, it's really hurting the settlers. Like, their racism and their white supremacy is also hurting themselves in this situation because they're fucking stupid and they're not listening to people who know what they're talking about. Also, I read Braiding Sweetgrass almost a year ago now in January, and it was like the first thing I read in so long that made me feel any kind of like hope about the real world. But the author of that, Robin Wall Kimmerer, she talks a lot about indigenous wisdom and how if you dismiss and disrespect indigenous knowledge about nature just because the way it's communicated or the framework it's in doesn't align with your Western colonial perspective, you're missing out on so much valuable, innovative research and knowledge. I liked the idea of this in the context of the spiritual, supernatural world, that they know what vampires are and they know how to deal with them, the same way that Annie has her spiritual tradition and her knowledge and wisdom from generations. They have that too. And they're trying to help the white people, even though those white people would kill them for no reason just because they're racist. Yeah, but if they're going to ignore them, then okay, you're going to die. So they get out of there. And that's it. That's the end of them in the movie. Anyway, Joan, the white woman, closes the door on them and she goes back inside and she's calling for her husband. And you get a feeling like, I don't know, girl, like it's not looking so good for you. And sure enough, she finds her husband and the vampire in a room together, and the vampire has like blood all over his face. And her husband is laying in a pool of his own blood. He has been bitten and killed. And she screams, and Remmick is like, "Hey, don't worry. He's just resting. He's going to feel a lot better now." And her husband stands back up and he's a vampire too. And we know that because he has like fangs and his eyes are glowing. She should have listened, but also it kind of was too late anyway. Back to our A-plot, back to our friends. The juke joint seems to be absolutely buzzing. There's lots of people over, but the problem is that people don't have money basically to spend enough on food and drink to cover what the twins spent on setting everything up, which is maybe something that they didn't consider, is that the whole point was for them to go home to their family and community and provide this space that they always dreamed of. The problem is that the Black community in Clarksdale doesn't have money to spend as clientele because of Jim Crow and sharecropping and segregation and all of that. Most of them are working as sharecroppers and have basically no pay. Some of them are paying with these like wooden tokens that I didn't understand totally what they were, but I looked it up and I think it's kind of like a check or credit, but it's not cash. That's the stressful element right now. They're not going to make enough money. Mary pulls up and she is wearing, again, like baby pink, like a light dusty pink silk dress and like a little silk shawl. Again, this like very hyper feminine white woman appearance. Cornbread doesn't recognize her. Cornbread's working the door. That's what they needed him for. He's like the bouncer, and he doesn't recognize her, and he kind of like gets nervous, and he's like, ma'am, like, I'm sorry, I think you might be in the wrong place, because they obviously don't want white people to come in. She's like, Cornbread, don't you remember me? Then he finally recognizes her. It's been so long since she was there and she's grown up, but she's like family, and they hug, and he's like, oh my God, come in. This also adds context to the fact that like Mary was truly like raised as family and as part of this community, and then at some point like had to clean break, leave completely, and start a new life as a white woman. But this is where she feels at home, and this is her family essentially. Inside, Sammie is performing with Slim, but Sammie's really the star. And this scene, this juke joint dance scene is just so iconic. Like, I really think that this is going to be talked about and remembered for so long in film. He is singing his blues with his beautiful deep voice, and he's strumming that resonant guitar, kind of like moving through the space as he performs. We see all of the people in the juke joint like dancing and vibing to the music, and there's certain shots that are so beautifully composed and so beautifully show like the movement and connection among people that the music is like facilitating, where everyone's kind of doing their own thing, but they're also doing their own thing together. Like, just the perfect dance floor, the perfect vibe, and everyone seems so comfortable and is having so much fun. I didn't know this, but people have since pointed out that it was inspired by a very famous painting called The Sugar Shack. It's an Ernie Barnes painting, The Sugar Shack. Look it up if you haven't seen it. It is so beautiful, but it looks really like Ryan Coogler was definitely inspired by this in how he composed and like choreographed the juke joint. And also there's confirmation of that because one of the movie posters that was released is more obviously like done and painted in a way to look like this. So very, very cool to reference a painting in your framing of a film scene, and also like a perfect inspiration to capture that movement, that freedom, that joy, that energy. The painting itself has so much like movement and action in it, but then to have someone actually genuinely make it in motion is just very cool. We start to see what it means to have the ability to sing in a way that conjures spirits. So in the juke joint, besides the people that we met already in 1932 Clarksdale, we start to see Black musicians from all different time periods in the past and the future, also in the juke joint. One of them that you might think is from the past, but actually would have been from the future. It's from the 1950s. But even in the 1950s, it's drawing on like very old traditions, but it's called Zowli, and it's a traditional mask dance from the Guru people of the Ivory Coast. I'd never heard of this before, but yeah, we see one of these performers wearing like a colorful mask. You see this Jimi Hendrix type guy slamming an electric guitar, a DJ playing hip hop music, people like twerking, just like a total mix of past and future. And the camera is just moving you through the joint, and in all these different little like nooks and corners are people from these different eras enjoying the music, and the music's kind of blending together what Sammie is performing, seamlessly blending in for just a couple of seconds all the different music styles from past and future. Really just like such a beautifully orchestrated scene. I don't know how they choreographed it. I don't know how they planned it. It was incredible. I will say, like, on first watch, I was kind of thrown off by the inclusion of the future spirits because it kind of took me out of it for a second. And because, like, that's not super common, I feel like, in spiritual or supernatural fiction to have future spirits. That feels more like a sci-fi, like, time travel type of thing. But it's also like a way that Ryan Coogler is including Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is basically like a movement, an artistic movement that expresses a futuristic, sometimes even like sci-fi like future for Black art, culture, history. Black Panther, which Ryan Coogler also did, is an example of some elements of this, where the people of Wakanda are like super scientifically advanced and almost futuristic. So in the juke joint, it's not the future from us, but the future from 1932, Clarksdale. Sammie's music is able to connect them to that distant future and all those different expressions of Black identity and art and culture that are still to come. Some of them in his lifetime, some of them beyond his lifetime. And I just think that's so cool. Another thing that I felt was a bit awkward was incorporating the chows as well and their Chinese identity, because we have like a moment where Grace and Bo Chow are like dancing together, and there's a spirit that looks to be more from like a Chinese tradition kind of just dancing near them. And maybe that was a little bit awkward in terms of choreography of being like, there's Chinese spirits too. But I don't know how you could weave that in a less awkward way. So it's fine. And I did look it up after to try to understand what that reference was. And it was a Peking or Beijing opera performer. Very cool. Anyway, beautiful, powerful scene. We are experiencing it from the inside, and we start to see the walls literally burning. And then we cut outside into the night around the juke joint, and we see that from the outside you can see the juke joint burning down. Like, it looks like it is physically burning down, all four walls around it, the ceiling, the roof is caving in. But you also know that it's not burning down because no one's reacting to it like it is. It's in this in-between spirit realm, sort of superimposed on the real world right now. It is burning down. This was such a cool moment, and we get this shot where from far away from the juke joint, the night is like kind of cool toned, and in the foreground you have Remmick and Joan and the guy, I don't know their names, Remmick and the KKK couple in the foreground, and they look very blue and cold and dead. And then it's such a stark contrast to the burning flames, the bright orange fire of the juke joint in the background that they're looking towards. Such a cool symbolic moment for the cinematography. The colors make sense because, first of all, they're literally dead. They're vampires, so that's why they look blue and cold and dead. But then also they have like musical instruments strapped to their backs, and they're kind of gazing at it hungrily. And I feel like this is also a reference to cultural appropriation and the way that white artists have been stealing from Black culture with no credit or respect forever. Like, you get the sense that, just like Slim said, they like the music. You know, they might hate the people, but they like the music and they're drawn to it. And then also I feel like the burning fire of the wood mill is reminiscent of the images of like burning crosses of the KKK, but it's, rather than being an act of violence that reinforces and constantly rebuilds segregation, it's a fire that's burning down barriers because it's pulling in all these different times and places of spirits. It's also just a good like representation from a storytelling perspective for us to understand how Remmick, the vampire, was drawn to the juke joint. So he has been drawn there and pulled there by the magic of Sammie's performance. It's like a beacon to him. Oh, I forgot to mention Perline. Perline is this woman that Sammie met at the train station. So when Sammie was performing with Delta Slim and like a crowd gathered around, there was this like pretty young girl, Perline, looking at him. And he kind of approaches her and he's like, you should come to the juke joint tonight. Because she was kind of like looking at him flirtily. And she says she's married. And he goes, happily? Okay, Sammie. You know, she tells him off, but you can tell that she's like being very flirty and interested with him. So she did end up coming to the juke joint that night without her husband. And she's a singer as well. So she's going to sing later. At this point, like after Sammie performs, they're talking, whatever. He's like, did you bring your husband? She's like, nope. And they go into a back room and start hooking up. They're like making out. And then, sorry, I don't know how to talk about this in a way that's not like so explicit. Basically, he's taking the lessons that he learned from Stack on the road about what women like and trying to focus on Perline Perline. And she's like kind of shy about it. She's like, wait, like, hold on. He insists. And it's like, not like he's like performing for her, but that he is just earnestly expressing his like admiration and adoration of her and her beauty in a way that was like really nice to see. I also especially love to see that because Perline is also like a dark-skinned Black woman like Annie. And it's just good to see the representation of her and Annie as these like, they get to be sexy and feminine and delicate and tough all at once. Like they have the dynamic characteristics of a real human being, and they're not being like flattened in any way. And also just because of the way that like Black women are often portrayed in this way where white supremacy frames Black women as being like less feminine than white women, as being somehow manly, which is why like that infamous cartoon of Serena Williams is so racist, which is why every season of Love Island, I didn't think I was going to talk about Love Island in this episode, but which is why every season of Love Island, we see especially darker skinned Black women be mistreated and overlooked, even if they're like so stunningly gorgeous. In the context, especially of love and relationships, I have a book somewhere behind me called Sex, Love, Race in American History. Especially in the context of love and sex and relationships, it is so important to gender identity, right? And the racist depiction of Black women is to say that they are, you know, somehow less deserving of the adoration and gentleness that white women receive from men in these heterosexual relationships. Ryan Coogler is very intentionally showing us that that is wrong and presenting this alternate, more human, more real, loving view of Black women as the romantic interests, as the prize, as the most desirable and the most beautiful. And that is really, really nice to see. Anyway, that's cute. It's actually kind of wholesome and cute and romantic. But meanwhile, our three musketeers have approached and tried to get into the juke joint, and Cornbread's kind of like trying to like explain to them, like, I don't know if you guys are in the right place. The same kind of reaction he had to Mary at first before he recognized her. Honestly, this was one of the funniest moments in the movie, and I really liked the moments of levity that were woven in amongst all the darkness and violence. Remmick and the couple are trying to get invited in. Because this movie, another thing I really like about it is it super like adheres to the rules of vampires that we know from pop culture, from folklore, and from like the vampire tradition. One of those things is that they have to be invited in. They cannot like walk into your home. So they can't walk into the juke joint. They need to be invited in. So they're trying to basically like schmooze their way in. And they say, you know, we're just here to play music. We're just musicians. We just heard your music. We like your music. We want to play our music. And they pull out their little like banjos or whatever. A very cutesy Mumford and Sons moment of this song where the lyrics are disturbing. Pick poor Robin clean. Basically about like eating poor Robin. But it's in such a cutesy little voice, which is another great representation of how white supremacy is often upheld by like this very shiny, sweet, cutesy veneer, but underneath it, like in plain sight, is these horrible words of violence. Our crew is not impressed, so they're kind of like, no, you can't come in. I think it's Stack who's talking to them. I don't remember. But he asks them, like, are you Klan? Are you associated with the Klan? And Remmick is like, oh, sir. He's like appalled. And he's saying sir, as opposed to how the guy who sold them the milk kept calling them disrespectful names, like kept calling them boys. So Remmick understands how to manipulate his way through these racial dynamics. He knew to use slurs and be racist with the KKK couple to get them on his side and to have them see him as like a white ally. Ally is a weird word to use there, but you know what I mean. And here he understands how to position himself as like a super respectful and appreciative, harmless white person. He says he believes in equality. It's very corporate Black History Month email from Remmick. So they get turned away. And he goes, okay, but we're just going to walk really slowly in case you change your mind. And they kind of drag their feet and mope away. Honestly, it was cute and funny. But Mary is talking to Stack inside after they turn these people away. And she's like, you guys are broke, right? Like, she goes, I know what you did in Chicago. You robbed both the Irish and the Italians and fled, hoping that they'd blame each other because they had all this Irish beer and Italian wine that they brought down with them, right? And all this money. And so Mary is sus on them and she's figured it out. And she's worried about them. She's like, they're going to come looking for you. And if you don't have money to pay up, you're going to be in trouble. So she wants to suss out those people the vampires who tried to come in because they had flashed that they have like gold coins with them. She's like, let me just go talk to them. Okay. Let me just go talk to them and suss them out. So she's trying to use her whiteness or her proximity to whiteness to help. She's trying to use that power that she has, that she will be safe, presumably with these people, to help. But this is what Stack has been afraid of. And this is what Stack basically ran away from, is this dynamic where just existing together creates like a weird separation, power dynamic where she can go in certain places that he can't, and that it's endangering him, but it's also endangering her. Like both of them are endangered by existing together. So she goes out, she kind of struts out, and they're sitting kind of far from the juke joint on like a bench, and it's just super dark out, and there's like a light or a lamp or something. There's some way that you see a vague like white cross behind the shoulder of the husband, and I don't know what it was. It wasn't like literally a white cross. It might have been the lamppost that looked like a white cross, like out of focus, but it was a clear reference to the white crosses of the KKK that they would burn. Very spooky and very ominous. She goes to talk to them. She's just like, I just came to see, what your deal is, if you guys are good people. And she sits with them, and they're just giving such creepy vibes. Remmick is happy, obviously. I don't know how exactly he has sussed this out, but he kind of reads her and he's like, you are lonely and you're looking for family and community, and you've got a deep sadness in you. And she's like, yeah, my mom just died. Like, true. And Remmick kind of like vaguely alludes to he can offer that community and family, and she's kind of like getting freaked out, and then he like looks at her and his eyes are glowing red, like he's going vamp mode, and she gets up and starts like walking away like really quickly back towards the juke joint. We see her kind of like break into a run, but then from behind her, like you just see Remmick kind of out of focus, like a shadow of him flying up from behind her to catch her. Terrifying. Honestly, terrifying, because up until this point, no one has flown anywhere. We did not see him flying away from the Choctaw. So we just learned that he can fly. That is also vampire lore, vampire accurate, but just very scary moment. Anyway, before we see what happens there, we cut back inside, and now Perline is performing. Has also like a beautiful singing voice, and everyone is dancing. Again, it looks so much like the Sugar Shack painting, and it's just like fun and beautiful. But at the door, Mary kind of very slyly asks Cornbread to invite her in. She goes, are you gonna let me in? You're just gonna stand there? And he's like taken aback, like, okay, no need to be rude. But he goes, yeah, no, come in. And she kind of smirks, and you're like, fuck, she's definitely a vampire. She's just really smart, and she figured out a way to get invited in very subtly. So she's walking in. She's walking through the juke joint. We get like a POV from behind her, similar to POV shots we've gotten before. She kind of starts like shimmying and swaying her shoulders back as she walks, and it's almost like she got drunk, but it's like she has been released from the constant super uptight wound state that she lives in, where she is performing whiteness and performing femininity, because she just basically died and came back to life, right? We're assuming. And now she's a vampire. You're going to hell anyway, or you're like demonic anyway. You might as well enjoy yourself, and you might as well indulge in all the earthly sins that you, quote unquote sins, that you never got to before, like the forbidden man that you're not allowed to be with. She's been in a weird way like liberated and empowered by her death. And her shoulder shimmy, I don't know whose idea that was, but Haley Steinfeld, her like physical acting and the way that she moves her body is so good in this. She's so good. So she goes ahead and pretty aggressively tries to seduce Stack, and he's only a man. He is but a man. So they go into, I think, a different room than Sammie and Perline were in, but they start hooking up. As we see Mary and Stack kind of like making out in this room, we're cutting back and forth to like other stuff happening in the club outside the room they're in. And there's been like a fight has broken out over poker or something that Smoke is trying to deal with. Like the patrons of the club basically got into a fight. Smoke tells Sammie, go get Stack. Like, I need Stack over here to help. And Sammie goes to find Stack, but he opens the door on Mary and Stack, like going at it, and he obviously freaks out and closes the door and leaves, and he's like, I'm not interrupting them. You go get your brother. So Smoke goes back to find Stack, and when he opens the door, we see the same like position they were in before, where Mary's like straddling him, but now she is draining his blood. This is very vampire core, like vampires being sexually promiscuous or like somehow sexual is very common in vampire lore. I don't even feel like giving examples of that because I just feel like you guys know what I mean. So she has gotten him, and Smoke obviously is like, what the fuck? So he freaks out and he like empties his gun into her. He shoots her like a million times and her body like flails comically. It's almost like just shoving her back a little bit. Bullets go through her and she just like runs out. She says, we're gonna kill all of you. And then she runs out. Scary stuff, guys. Scary stuff. Smoke is shook, obviously. Smoke and Slim kick everyone out. They tell all the patrons, like, you need to leave. You need to go home. Something bad is happening. And at this point, like, they don't know anything. They don't know that Mary was turned by the vampires. For all they know, like, it's a totally unrelated thing and she is a demon or something. Like, I don't know. They don't know anything, but their instinct is to kick everyone out. Of course, we're thinking that doesn't seem like a good idea because you're kicking them out. You're feeding them to the lions waiting outside, basically. But we end up with Smoke, who is devastated, holding his dead brother. We have Smoke and Annie inside. Then we have Grace, but she sent her husband Beau out to get the car earlier, so she's alone. Sammie and Pearline and Delta Slim, the old man. That's our final, like, crew who are batting down the hatches in the juke joint now. Cornbread tries to come on back in, and he's being so sus. Like, he's being such a vampire so obviously to them. It doesn't fool anyone for even a second. He's just like, come on, guys, like, invite me in. The tension is really intense here. They're all at the door kind of watching, and Annie is the sharpest eye here because she has all of this knowledge from the root work tradition. Cornbread's being really sus, so they're not inviting him back in, but then also we get like confirmation that he's a vampire when he tries to hand Smoke some money, and when Smoke reaches out the door to grab it, Cornbread tries to attack him. So they're like, shit. And Annie has figured it out. Back inside, they're regrouping and she's explaining to them, we just need to make it till sunrise. These are vampires. They're the worst spirits. We need wooden stakes, garlic, silver, holy water. They're gathering all these supplies. And she's saying that vampires are cursed to have their soul stuck in the body forever, unable to rejoin the ancestors. So it's still their soul, their human soul, but you're basically forced to stay in your body forever. You can't like die and go to the afterlife, which is not like different from the classic definition of a vampire. It just was an interesting way of presenting it as like being trapped in your body, because when you say it like that, it is pretty horrifying. I don't even really want to be in my body to begin with, let alone be stuck here. Stack wakes up. So Stack was in the closed door after he had like died because they knew that he was gonna turn, I guess, but like Smoke wasn't about to like put him outside, but he like bangs on the door and he's like, hey guys, like, hey, let me out. So scary. Because Smoke has just been like sobbing over him being dead in his arms. Like he knows that Stack was dead. But Stack is just like, yeah, I don't know. I feel better now. That's kind of freaky, right? And similar to Cornbread, it's like, you're not convincing anyone. Mary was the only one, it seems, who was able to get her act together right after being turned into a vampire and figure out how to be in any way subtle about it. Stack like busts out of the door he's in and he's like going to attack them, but Annie, she throws garlic juice on him and he gets like burned and he runs out the door the same way that Mary ran out the door when she was shot a bunch of times. Annie also turns to Smoke and makes him promise to stake her through the heart if she gets bitten. So if she gets turned into a vampire, she's like, you have to kill me. Or if she gets killed by the vampires, you have to kill me before I turn. And she says, I have someone waiting for me on the other side and they're waiting for you too. So the child that they lost, their daughter, she's like, the worst outcome is not death. The worst outcome is me not getting to reunite with my daughter in the afterlife. Outside, our crowd of vampires has only grown because they sent the entire juke joint out. Those are all vampires now. So there's a whole crowd of them. And it's an interesting juxtaposition to the crowd inside the juke joint during the musical performances where they were all kind of like doing their own thing, but still part of this one experience together. By contrast, we have a very hive mind cult vibe happening outside where Remmick is in the center and he's singing this Irish song. Rocky Road to Dublin. It has so many like quintessential Irish folklore-y sounds in it. I really liked that. But he's singing and he's dancing a little jig in the center. And I just feel like his Irish dancing wasn't that good. One of my best friends is Irish and did Irish dance growing up. I don't know if she saw the movie. Roisin, if you saw the movie, or can you look up this scene and let me know? Because I don't think his jig was that good. But regardless, it was cool to see it included. Like, it was accurate. Like, it didn't look like they just had him jump up and down. But I don't think this man, the actor, is a dancer. Anyway, he's doing this little jig, and instead of it being portrayed as this like stupid or silly thing, which I feel like often in Irish dance is portrayed that way, which from an American point of view, Irish culture is like celebrated. But you have to also see it from the perspective of Irish people having their language and culture be like systematically stomped out by the British, and see how like making fun of traditional Irish dance is just part of that colonial mindset. So Ryan Coogler approaches even the villain, the Irish vampire, he approaches his culture with respect and appreciation as well, where our very scary, serious, intense vampire dancing this Irish dance, it doesn't look stupid. It's bizarre. It's bizarre to be dancing and singing, but it serves a purpose in the story and in the character development where you understand that this guy, I was going to say this man, but this vampire is basically homesick. Like, he is longing for a connection to this Irish history and culture and music, and to the people that he knew when he was human. Or at least that's what I got out of it. I got the feeling that he, just like in the juke joint when everyone was connecting with past and future spirits, you feel that Remmick is a longing for that he wants that connection to his music and culture as well. But everyone around him is kind of like out of focus. It's really focused on him, and they're all just like very uniform, walking around him or like clapping along with him. And you can see in just the choreography and in the acting and framing how different this idea of equality and family and community is to the true experience of it for that one scene inside the juke joint. This version of it that Remmick tries to sell to them as like a family forever is really a cult of personality, and it's not the same. It's him flattening everyone and everything to be about him and his culture only. No one has joined it consentingly, obviously. And he's not honoring any shared cultural traditions or honoring any of the other people's history and traditions. It is about him. But the music is awesome. The energy is high. It keeps building up, and definitely pretty terrifying if you're inside that juke joint watching that happen. We get a couple more things here where I felt like it was starting to drag. Like, they thought that there was a vampire amongst them inside because they found a guy in a pool of blood and they threw that guy out. They stand in a circle and they all eat pickled garlic, and there's like so much tension and buildup, and this scene is so slow, only for like all of them to eat the garlic and be fine at the end of the day, which was funny kind of, and it was like a good moment of tension and release, but it was so drawn out. And this is part of what I mean when I say I had issue with the pacing, where if you think about it, like all of this shit broke out kind of halfway through the movie. We start having people getting bitten and turned. And so then when after it starts happening, we get things like this that don't really do anything for us in terms of character or plot. It kind of annoyed me because I was like, I could have had more time in the juke joint before everyone started dying, you know? Anyway, turns out that it was not blood. It was just red wine. This guy was just drunk in a pool of red wine, and they had already thrown him outside. He's banging on the door to get let back in, but Cornbread attacks him before they can decide what to do about that. And they all come to the door and they see it happen, which is like traumatizing and gross. It's pretty gory here. Meanwhile, like, this is happening off to the side. Cornbread is attacking this man. And then Grace's husband, Beau, Chow, starts approaching. He's like chilling. He's like, hey, wife, like, I got the car, like, let's go. And Grace is like, are you seeing what's happening right there? The murder happening? And Beau, again, the way that like all these recently turned vampires are so chalant, he's just like, oh, that? Don't worry about that. Cornbread's just a little hungry. It's so eerie and spooky, but it is also so funny because like they're just so bad at hiding that they're vampires. And Remmick comes and approaches the front with Beau, and the other vampires are following behind. And he lets Grace know that he can read Beau's mind. So they share like a hive mind, and everyone who turns into a vampire from him, I guess it's kind of like a transitive property thing. Like anyone he turns into a vampire directly is part of the hive mind, but then it also seems like anyone that he turned, who turned someone else, is also part of the hive mind. It's kind of like an MLM. So they're all sharing access to each other's memories. And so Remmick threatens Grace with the knowledge that Lisa, their daughter, is alone at the store. He goes, well, we can pay Lisa a visit. Obviously, Grace freaks out. And then he proves that he can actually read Beau's mind by like speaking Chinese to her. And he says something like gross and perverted to her in Chinese. And so she's like shook to her core because why is this white man speaking Chinese to me and reading my husband's thoughts and threatening my daughter? Fair enough. Pretty tough on Grace. But Remmick lets them know that he really just wants Sammie. And if they give him Sammie, you know, all good, I'll leave the rest of you alone. He doesn't explicitly say it, but he wants Sammie because, like I said, he wants to conjure the spirits of the people that he knew and lost throughout his immortal life, like probably his original human family and loved ones. And also to the Irish history and culture that got progressively stomped out by British colonialism. Sammie immediately goes to self-sacrifice to walk out the door. But Delta Slim is the first one to jump and say, nope, that's not going to happen. He says he belongs to us. He belongs with us. So he corrects from he belongs to us to he belongs with us. And that's the difference. Their community, their idea of community is belonging with one another. Remmick's idea is of belonging to him. But I thought this was really beautiful and kind of moving. And I almost only really noticed this on the second watch. But Delta Slim met Sammie today, right? He met him earlier today. And by nighttime, he's like fiercely protective over him as family, that they are family and no one can touch Sammie. And coming from this man who was introduced to us as kind of like a jaded drunk, it's a beautiful thing to see. And it's like heartbreaking to see because he has lost so many of his friends, imprisonment, lynching, whatever horrible fate. And he cannot bear to lose another friend, a child, to violence from white people again. And I think you also can see that this is sort of a moment of redemption for Delta Slim because even though he does not deserve to feel the guilt, he has like survivor's guilt for being the only one of his friends who's still living as a free man. The rest of his friends are imprisoned or dead. And he obviously is like so burdened by that grief and guilt. And that's partly why he is an alcoholic and why he doesn't dream of a better life for him. He doesn't feel that he deserves it because none of his friends are even free like he is, even though he's free in poverty and oppression. He has this moment of stepping up as the eldest in the room, as like a dignified member of the community and a protector figure when the youngest is threatened. And I think that was really cool and beautiful and a moment of dignity for him instead of him being just a drunk the whole movie. Remmick is still trying to sweet talk them into giving up, and he tells Smoke, you know, it doesn't matter, you're never gonna actually be free or successful. The guy who sold you this sawmill, he's the grand dragon of the KKK, and he's coming in the morning to kill you all. Like, this was gonna be a slaughterhouse. He set you up. Oh, and he knows this because the first couple who he turned, the guy is the nephew of Hogwood, the white man who sold them the mill. He got access to his memories and he can see that the KKK was going to attack. At this point, Stack and Mary have also kind of like come to the front and they want to convince their family to get turned and join them too. And Stack says, you know, what he's saying is true. I can read his mind. Mary's like pleading with them. And she says, after we kill y'all, we're going to have heaven right here on earth. So the first watch, when she said that, I was like, oh, Mary, shut up. Like, Mary, not now. But on the second watch, when I was giving everything a bit more of my thought, I found this really sad because there's a reason why she thinks that. Like, to her, heaven on earth would be just simply being able to live with the people she loves and not be afraid of being killed because they're already dead. Her situation is kind of an interesting lens into how arbitrary racial segregation can be and how arbitrary white supremacy can be, but how in actuality the way that it changes people's lives and changes the whole trajectory of their existence is really ironic and very present in Mary's story. Being dead now and living forever is like a dream because she's like, well, now everyone can stop telling me that I'm going to get killed for being around the people I love. And the people I love are not going to get killed for being around me. We can't be killed. We're already killed. We're already dead. We can just exist together. And this is her dream. Really sad. Stack is trying to talk directly to Smoke to like convince him. And he also confirms in this moment that Smoke is the big brother, as in like the twin who was birthed first, I guess, which makes sense because already this whole movie we see Smoke being the kind of protector. So Stack is trying to tell Smoke, like, this is the only way. Like, we were never going to be able to be successful and free with this juke joint, even though they had literally done everything to get the money and come back home and make this dream happen. He's like, we didn't even have a chance. They were going to fucking kill us anyway. So this is our option. Like, come join us. He clearly just wants his brother to join him. And also both Stack and Mary have the kind of like zeal of a recent convert, that very cult like, is this the best thing ever, just join us. And you feel that they really truly believe it, you know, like they're not trying to be evil, but they're kind of intoxicated right now by the idea of immortality and being able to be together. Smoke almost falls for it. Like, Smoke is kind of like convinced by Stack and almost moves to go outside, but they all drag him back and slam the door. Stack kind of shakes his head and he just goes, no vision. I love that. Grace is kind of crashing out because she's worried about Lisa. She's worried that Remmick is going to go get Lisa. Fair enough. And Grace is trying to like goad all of them into fighting. She goes, we can't just sit and wait here all night. My daughter's going to get killed. We have to fight them. And everyone else is like, no, we really just have to wait it out. Smoke is like, I'm trying to think what to do. When no one else is on board with her and they're all kind of like avoiding eye contact and not doing anything, she tries to grab one of the wooden stakes they prepared and like charge out herself to kill all the vampires. She's clearly like not thinking straight because she's blinded by terror at the thought of her daughter being harmed. But they all grab her and hold her back. So they're trying to hold Annie back and she starts trying to scream something and Smoke covers her mouth with his hand. In the theater watching this the first time, this was such an intense moment. Everyone is just like, Grace, shut the fuck up. But she like bites into Smoke's hand until it makes this awful like crunching noise. She like breaks a bone with her teeth. And so he drops his hand and immediately she screams, come on in, you motherfuckers. The actress, I want to shout out the actress, Lee Jun Lee. She was so good. Remmick outside, kind of like, I don't know, 100 meters away from the juke joint, he just turns and smiles. And it's the most like sinister, ominous look he gives the camera. I also want to shout out that actor. I haven't mentioned him yet, I don't think. It's Jack O'Connell. Jack O'Connell, I think, is half Irish. His father's Irish. He looked so familiar in this movie and I just couldn't place him. He was in Skins. He was Cook, James Cook in Skins. I was in love with him when I was like 11. This little devious smile he gives with his glowing eyes was scary as fuck. Remmick strolls in through the open doors with the whole crowd of vampires behind him, and there's like just a moment of almost like awkward tension, and then Grace throws, I think it's a Molotov cocktail she throws at Remmick. I think fire kills them as well as all the other things, but she misses and it lights the joint on fire and the fight just breaks out and shit goes down. People start dying left and right, as in like vampires start getting staked in the heart and dying, but then also all the humans are getting bitten and dying. It's a bloodbath. It is a true bloodbath. Grace does end up staking her husband Beau in the heart, and they both like burst into flames. She's like burning alive. It's very, at this point it's pretty gory and like intense. And the sad thing is that like she probably did save Lisa. Like, who knows if Remmick really would have gone and gotten Lisa, but probably, because he so badly wanted Sammie. And Grace doing this effectively, she died, Beau died, lots of these other people die, most of them die, but she did save Lisa. So there's that. Anyway, Annie gets bitten. I don't remember by whom. It's not Stack or Mary, but Annie gets bitten, and Smoke, you know, he made a promise to her what he would do, and he doesn't even really hesitate. He stakes her in the heart, which it must be like so awful for him to do, but this like act of love, really, of respecting her wishes, I thought was really beautiful. He's totally unselfish. You know, he's like honoring her wishes immediately, no matter how disturbing they are to him, because he shares the same desire as her to reunite with their baby. Even if he's skeptical of her beliefs, I think he does believe in the afterlife that she believes in, and at least wants to hope that they can be together with their baby who they lost again. So he stakes her. And when Stack and Mary see that, they both scream and they're devastated because they genuinely really wanted to have this forever family with Smoke and Annie. It is still Stack and Mary inside their new vampire bodies. Everyone's getting killed. I don't know how I can stress that enough. Perline eventually gets killed too, and Sammie sees it that happen right in front of him. And then he finally runs out of the juke joint when that happens. And at this point, the fight is like inside and outside. Smoke and Stack are like wrestling back and forth, fighting inside. And when Sammie runs out, Remmick spots him and flies up behind him, just like he did with Mary in that shot. And he like grabs Sammie and claws him in the face. So we see how Sammie got those like claw marks that he had in the opening flash forward when he stumbles into church. Remmick kind of like walks with Sammie in his grip into this pond or lake, maybe like a small lake or a large pond. Well, this is the Delta, right? So there's probably lots of these like little ponds that are all connected. Anyway, Remmick walks with him into the water and he's holding him, and it feels all very symbolic of like a baptism, but it's a demonic baptism rather than a Christian baptism. Am I saying that word weird? Why am I saying baptism? Baptism. Remmick wants to baptize Sammie into vampirehood. But Remmick is still kind of like talking, like he's still doing his villain evil plan spiel, which partly makes me roll my eyes in the horror movie trope way of like, really, you're explaining your whole evil plan before you make sure that you are going to be able to execute it. But also, I do think it makes a little bit of sense because Remmick really fancies himself to be a good person who are like a good vampire, where he really thinks that he's saving and helping these people, or at least he's like happy to convince himself of that. He doesn't feel guilty about it. He's just like entirely selfish and will do anything to get what he wants. He's explaining to Sammie why he wants him and why he wants his power, and I feel like it's because he really thinks that he can convince Sammie that it's worth it or that it's a good idea, and somehow he still wants that rather than it being entirely by force, even though it is entirely by force regardless, you know? We're cutting back and forth, Smoke and Stack fighting inside, Remmick and Sammie showdown in the pond. Sammie starts praying. He starts saying the Our Father prayer, and he's scared. Like, you can tell he's really scared. So he starts saying the Our Father as like ironically as a Hail Mary. As he starts saying it, Remmick actually joins in and finishes the prayer in his true Irish accent. Like, he kind of has been going back and forth between the fake Southern accent, which is his like default, and then sometimes speaking in this Irish accent, which is also fake because Jack O'Connell has like a British accent, I think. But his father's Irish. So as far as I can hear, it's a good Irish accent. But he finishes the Our Father with Sammie, and Sammie keeps saying it. And now they're praying together, and all of the vampires gathering around the lake are praying too. It's a very weird scene of like a demonic baptism church moment. It's the opposite of what Sammie's father cultivates in the church. Remmick says, long ago, the man who stole his father's land forced those words upon them. So people have taken that in different ways. Some people think that that means that he's from a time pre-Christianity in Ireland, which would have been like 1300 years ago. But it doesn't totally make sense because Christianity was mostly spread like peacefully in Ireland, not through violent conquest. So then other people have pointed out that he's probably talking about the English language prayer being forced on them, which would have been more like 300 years ago from this time. So I tend to agree more with the latter, although I'm not totally sure about it all, because also Ryan Coogler in an interview said that he wanted the vampire to be really old and be from before a time of these racial definitions. But 300 years ago, like the Atlantic slave trade would have been well underway, and so it wouldn't be so foreign to him. Not sure. Regardless, he is drawing a connection to the Irish experience of colonialism and imperialism with the Black American experience of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow. The way that he kind of like villainizes this is by saying that like, yeah, my people suffered too. I'm the victim. Join me. I understand your victimhood. Like, he is able to navigate this space where he understands victimhood and he understands colonial violence because he did experience it. But now, in the context he's in, he can fit in with the colonizers because he's white, and he can also kind of manipulate emotionally the people who he's trying to get on his side by saying like, I know what it's like. I've been there. Remmick starts dunking Sammie in the water, literally like a baptism. Again, don't really know why, but it was definitely a good symbolism. Just like from a like literal point of view, I don't really know why Remmick is doing that rather than biting him already. But he feels pretty soundly like he's won here. So meanwhile, inside, Stack, who remembers the one who is a vampire already, has Smoke like pinned finally, and he goes to bite him to turn him, but he gets like repelled by something. And the sound design is cool because whenever we get some kind of like magic from Annie, there's an interesting accompanying sound effect. Like when she was making the mojo bag, there's kind of this like tinkling, sparkling, magic-y sound around it. And then now when Smoke wearing the mojo bag like repels Stack off of him, it makes like a like there's some kind of noise to it. I don't know, but it was really perfect. Annie, even after dying, is still protecting Smoke, and it gives Smoke the moment that he needs to then reverse it. And now he has Stack pinned, and he grabs the wooden stake that he had dropped earlier. Cut back to Remmick and Sammie outside. Remmick is still raving about connection and blah, blah, blah. And he has his claws, which are now like fully like ugly, dirty little claws dug into Sammie's face and head. And Sammie finally is able to grab his guitar from behind him because he did not flee that juke joint for his life without his guitar. But he's able to grab his guitar and just smash it against Remmick's head. And this is why I especially noticed that it was a weird guitar, because the metal plate stabs into Remmick's head and like slices his skull. Really gory here, really pretty gross. But that gives Sammie a second where Remmick is like, he's not killed by that because it's not, I don't think it's like silver, you know, it's just metal. If it were silver, maybe it would have killed him. But yeah, this gets him pretty good. And all the vampires start like wailing in pain and clutching their heads. So they not only have a hive mind, but they feel his pain when he's being attacked. Remmick kind of comes back up and he goes, oh shit. Like it's a minor inconvenience to him, but it's not going to kill him. He just kind of rips the plate out, and now he has got like a Terminator face. Like half of it is kind of ripped off and it's pretty gross. I don't think there was much CGI. I think this was a lot of really good SFX makeup. So shout out to the makeup team. It was really gross. Good job, guys. But Remmick is finally now, he goes to bite Sammie, and at the last moment, he gets staked from behind, and we see that it is Smoke. Smoke the Protector, who saved his twin brother from their father's abuse, and who saved Annie, in a way, from eternal imprisonment as a vampire, has now also saved his little cousin. Here we get like a moment of kind of like catharsis, a moment of tension releasing. You start hearing thunder and lightning, and the very like spooky, intense, like haunting string music that we were hearing a minute before turns into more of like a plucky, folksy tune. And Remmick is dying like pretty slowly. And Sammie and Smoke are just like holding each other in the water, like waist deep in the water, holding each other, traumatized, watching Remmick die. And all the vampires on the shore are like watching on in horror. Remmick kind of slowly burns up, and at some point you see him like pretty fully on fire, aflame in the water, like while he's standing in the water. So the fire in the water, very symbolic of literally everything. Fire in the water, right? Like goodness and sin, heaven and hell. Smoke in blue, Stack in red, a sinner versus a righteous person. So you can see that Remmick ultimately burns up like the evil that he is, and he kind of gets like spirited away. And it's not even necessarily because he's a vampire that he's evil. It's because he's a shithead vampire who turns people just because and for his own personal cult. Meanwhile, Sammie and Smoke are safe together in the water because they are both pretty pure, good souls, regardless of if they have killed people or attacked people or whatever. All of the vampires on the shore also start dying and burning alive because the sun now comes up. The sun comes up pretty quickly, but like, okay, I don't really know how you film a sunrise in this way. Whatever. The sun comes up kind of quickly and all the vampires are burning and dying. In the aftermath, once they've all like burned away, basically, Smoke and Sammie are left again, like traumatized and pretty speechless outside the juke joint. Smoke tells Sammie to be strong, and he sends him off because he still knows the KKK are coming. Sammie drives home, and we know he's going to go to the church and see his dad again. Smoke is sitting outside the juke joint. He's trying to roll himself a cigarette, but his hands are shaking badly, and he's flashing through the night, watching Cornbread die, watching Annie die. He's remembering how when they bought the juke joint, they told Hogwood, the white guy who sold it to them. Smoke specifically said, I will kill you and all of the Klansmen if you come onto this property ever again. And he kind of has this moment of like, he's made that promise and he's going to keep that promise. He takes off the mojo bag. He wants to die. If there's any chance that the afterlife that Annie believes in is real, he wants to go there with her and their daughter. He's pretty much lost everyone else that he loves and cares about. Might as well die. If there's no afterlife, oh well. And if there is, then he will be reunited with the people he loves the most. And again, we get the music kind of going dissonant, getting ominous again. I remember thinking at this point that like throughout this movie, the music is really, really helpful and effective at storytelling in terms of letting us know what characters are thinking. Like it helps us understand the perspective of the character we're watching when the music shifts, and it supports the actor's performance, you know? It doesn't go against it. It's not confusing. It makes sense. Like every second of the movie, the music makes sense and is also beautiful. But it can't just be beautiful. Like the power of a score in film and why scores are so difficult is that it has to be beautiful, but also be interwoven into the story second by second, frame by frame. And I really feel that the score was doing that in this movie. So when the music kind of goes spooky again, I'm like, oh shit, we are not done yet. We're not in the clear light of day quite yet. We start intersplicing again, cutting back and forth with the choir at the church where Sammie's father is preaching, and then back to Smoke outside the juke joint. And he is getting all of his biggest guns together. He opens up a crate that looks to be like some of their old war stuff, like their helmets and photographs and guns. So he's like gearing up. Sure enough, we see 2 cars full of white men pull up with Hogwood leading them, kind of doing like an evil grand opening and grand closing fucker. Sammie enters the church where his father is, and he kind of like bursts open the doors at the back and is just standing there all beaten up with his guitar. And the image of him, you know, framed by the doorway with black crosses on the white walls all over the church is so stark difference to the image of him in the juke joint, where it was a different type of kind of spiritual experience or a different type of choir for him. This version of it, he doesn't belong in anymore. Like with what he's been through and the way it will change him forever, he can't kind of half-heartedly be part of his father's congregation anymore when he knows it's not what he really wants. I always thought it was weird that his dad is pretty unsurprised to see him like absolutely beat up, looking like he almost died, with claw marks down his face, covered in blood. His guitar is broken. And his dad is just like, yup, like I said, my son has been called to sin. Like, is that what he thinks happens every time you go out at night in the town? He's just not that surprised. Or maybe we're supposed to think that he, like Annie, is more aware of like the supernatural and was afraid of something supernatural happening with the music. Maybe he knew that something in their genetic history, or maybe he saw Sammie as a child start to summon spirits. You know what I mean? Like, I think he must have known on a deeper level why it was dangerous for Sammie to play music and why he keeps asking him to drop the guitar, give up the music, beyond just like being a preacher who wants his son to be a preacher and thinking that music and dancing is for loose women. I'm not sure. I think that's kind of open to interpretation. Back to the juke joint. It's this totally emptied out, destroyed mill, and a whole crowd of Klansmen have just rolled up, but the door is locked. And they seem surprised. They're like, the door's locked. And the other door's locked too. I loved this moment because it's them as vampires, white men as vampires in real life, the KKK as vampires in real life. They are shocked that they're not allowed in. You know, they're like almost offended. They're like, it's locked. They are so entitled and so used to being allowed everywhere and allowed to do everything that they are really taken aback by the most minor inconvenience, like a door being locked. So while they're like fiddling with the locks, they just start getting shot very accurately one by one. Smoke is a great shot, apparently. We're escalating. The choir is escalating. Sammie's preacher father is getting more animated. In the name of God, drop the guitar. Smoke then pulls out this giant machine gun and is just like emptying rounds out of this machine gun at the Klanmen, shooting them all down. It felt like a Call of Duty scene where you very unrealistically kill like 20 men yourself. He's doing that. It's so gratifying. Once he starts the machine gun, you hear a riff from an electric guitar, like a single electric guitar riff, and the choir is still going on. It's like the most beautiful symphony happening. Smoke is fighting the evil of these men with violence. Sammie is having this internal internal battle and this battle with his father over whether he will continue to do this sin, in his father's eyes, sin of creating the music that evokes spirits, or if he'll give up the temptation of it all. And also the electric guitar evokes the future of music that Sammie knows he can be a part of, because I don't know how aware everyone was of the spirits that Sammie conjured, because we don't really get much reaction to it from people, but I feel like Sammie was aware, and he heard that futuristic music being played. He heard the like Jimi Hendrix guitar in that scene in the juke joint. So that one strum of the electric guitar in the score means so much. It tells us so much about what Sammie is battling with. Smoke throws a grenade in one of the trucks as it's driving away, but he's not taking cover at all. Like, he's like very out in the open. And so he gets shot pretty badly in the stomach before the grenade explodes and they all die in the truck. And he's like now kind of stumbling down. The preacher, his voice is getting kind of like muffled. It's echoing. It almost has like reverb on it, like an electric guitar. And we're getting more and more electric guitar riffs building in. The main KKK guy, Hogwood, who sold them the place and like orchestrated to murder everyone, is crawling away, having been shot pretty badly but not killed yet. Smoke is bleeding, like gushing blood out of his stomach. And he asks Hogwood for a cigarette. Remember, he was trying to roll a cigarette before, but his hands were shaking too badly. He goes, "You have a cigarette?" Was it kind of corny? Yeah. But I also think it made sense. Smoke is standing over him, and he's the one who's in control in this moment. Even if he's dying, it doesn't matter. He won. You know, like he won this battle. He killed them all. And he's staring down. He's looking down at this man who is nothing. He's like a worm crawling on the ground, bleeding out, begging for mercy. And Smoke, his acting, Michael B. Jordan's acting here is really good, because Smoke doesn't look like giddy or even really that smug. He just looks traumatized and kind of numb. He's just numb to it. Like, he's just like, he just wants this man never to exist again. He just wants this man gone and silent. And he wants that evil, that parasite, that vampire dead. It's more satisfying, potentially, watching Smoke kill Hogwood than it is watching him kill Remmick. Smoke kind of falls down right onto his ass. He's like clearly bleeding out now, but he lights a cigarette and he's just smoking, staring at Hogwood while he begs for his life. And as he's smoking this cigarette, he hears like the gurgle of a baby. You hear like a me, you know, like the little sound that babies make. That wasn't good. I don't know any babies, but you know what I mean, the baby sound. And he turns and looks, and in this kind of like blurry haze of light, you see Annie and this adorable little baby sitting there. Annie's wearing like beautiful, like all white lace with like white flowers in her hair, and she just looks like very angelic. And she's just calmly sitting there cradling the baby, breastfeeding the baby. And I thought that was so beautiful, the image of her breastfeeding the baby as being this beautiful reunion that they had after she died. So you really feel like him dying is just him finally resting, him finally having relief from the constant violence and struggle of life. And Annie's like, "You can put out that cigarette and hold her." So he's like totally transfixed by them. He's forgotten about Hogwood, and he goes to reach for the baby, and Hogwood starts like talking again, like, "Please, I have money, blah, blah, blah." Smoke, again, just so numb, picks up the gun and just point blank like empties a whole round of this like machine gun into Hogwood and kills him. It's the same way that he shot Mary with all the bullets in his gun, kind of comically like overdoing it, because again, it's an expression of the way that this man is the true monster, the true vampire, and that Smoke is so traumatized and terrorized. He just needs to make sure this man is dead. And then he gets to hold his baby, and he says, "Papa's here." And then presumably he dies and goes to heaven with his Annie and his baby. That's really beautiful. I'm not gonna lie, I cried. It was beautiful. All right, we're almost done, guys. We're almost done. And I've been recording for 3.5 hours. Cut back to Sammie at church, still with his father. The electric music is kind of crescendoing. And presumably Sammie has chosen music over his father's pleas for him to put the guitar down. He's just driving away on a dirt road with his guitar, or with his stump of a guitar. And he looks scared, but he looks determined. And you have the thought of like Smoke telling him, "Be strong." He had that in mind. He just survived what he just survived, and he'll be traumatized forever. But he knows that he got a taste of that feeling of performing and being in communion with the spirits and with people, and that he'll never be satisfied if he doesn't at least try to get that again, chase that again. So he follows his dream, he follows his passion, and he's clutching the nub of the guitar to his chest, like for comfort. And he's driving past the cotton fields that he's probably been working his whole life under this sharecropping system. So he's breaking free with his pure talent and passion. Then we get a little epilogue and we see Sammie, 80 years old, sitting at a bar. We know it's Sammie because he has the scar, and he's a successful musician, and he's sitting at the bar like having a whiskey or something. The older Sammie is played by Buddy Guy, who is like an iconic musician. And the story behind that is so sweet. There's an interview, I'll link this as well, but there's an interview with Ryan Coogler where he says his uncle, who passed away in 2015, never did anything, like never went out to the movies unless he was seeing Ryan's movies, never, went out to drink, but he did always go see Buddy Guy when Buddy Guy was performing. He says he probably went like 50 times to see him perform. He says he still thinks of his uncle in the present tense, and he thought, my uncle would get such a kick out of it if I put Buddy Guy in the movie. Like, he'd be so excited. So Buddy Guy has never acted in anything before. He's 88. He looks very good for 88. And he said he would do it. And he said, like, he can't read very fast, but they said they would put an earpiece in for him and like read him his lines, which is just, I don't know, everything about it is so cute and sweet and beautiful. This is what I mean by like Ryan Coogler doesn't phone anything in. Every little decision, he's like, how can I make this as meaningful as possible? And he also uses his connections and influence to do shit that he thinks is cool. It's so genuine, and you can feel that. So Buddy Guy is sitting at the bar. Sammie is sitting at the bar, and someone comes in and says like, hey Sammie, a couple people outside want to see you. Is that okay? He says, yeah. And you get the vibe that he has like fans come see him all the time. But who walks in but Mary and Stack? And they are fitted up in the most insane like late 80s, early 90s outfits, like big jackets and sunglasses and gold, the whole 9 yards. And it turns out that Smoke could never kill Stack. So remember at the end, I said you saw Smoke was on top of Stack and he grabbed the wooden stake, but we never saw him stake him. We never saw Smoke stake Stack. Hello? We never saw Smoke stake Stack. The next time we saw Smoke was outside when he staked Remmick. Yeah, Smoke couldn't kill his brother, but he made him promise to never bother Sammie again and never try to turn Sammie into a vampire. And Stack and Mary respected that promise. Mary got away, like she ran away as soon as shit started going down. That I believe, because she's clearly like the smartest, savviest vampire that we saw. Yeah, it seems like they have lived as a couple for all these decades. They kind of offer him like one last time, like, do you want us to turn you? You can continue living forever. We can be together because he's old now. And Sammie's like, no, I'm good to go. When I go, I go. I've lived my life. And he says, just as they're turning to leave, he says, I still have nightmares about that night. I still have, he doesn't say PTSD, but clearly PTSD. But before the sun went down, it was the best night of his life. Like that thing, that moment that they captured, that energy that they captured was like lightning in a bottle. Like you only get that once. And it was spiritual, it was transcendent, it was paranormal, and it quite literally burned so brightly that it couldn't last. And Stack says, yeah, I agree. Me too. It's the last time I saw the sun, and it was the last time I saw my brother. And that's it. That's the movie. Had so much to say about universal human experiences of love and coming of age, familial love, abandonment, abuse, passion versus duty, temptation versus duty, all of these like totally universal themes, but in the context of these characters being Black in America during Jim Crow, during segregation, and how all of those normal human experiences and life moments were generationally shaped by racism and white supremacy. It was a great way of honoring Black history and art and culture. And in terms of like the story and the character, I feel that it was pretty perfect. I just had some issues with like the nitpicky like pacing, maybe dialogue stuff, but loved this movie. Let me know if you have any thoughts about things that I missed, any additional historical musical context you want to add. Coming up next, I watched Caught Stealing and The Roses last week, so I'm going to do episodes on those, and I'm going to see Splitsville tomorrow. So all of that is upcoming. Thank you if you listened all the way through. That's it. Bye.